On this episode of Tips from the Top Floor, you'll find out the truth about the top floor, the real truth. Marsalia has a question about synchronizing Lightroom catalog and settings between two computers, and Robert wonders about what magenta really is, because, unlike any other color, it is not part of the rainbow. This is Tips from the Top Floor, episode 797 for Thursday, November the 3rd, 2017.
Tips from the top floor, tips from the top, alright, from the top floor.
Hey, hello and welcome. This is Chris Marquardt. You're listening to Tips from the Top Floor, the longest running photography show on the planet, coming to you from the Viewfinder Villa right outside the gates of Hanover. You know what? Just recently, not too long ago, I've again received a question that I receive. Well, I would say every other week someone will ask, why on earth is it called Tips from the Top Floor? And are you aware, that's the second part of the question, are you aware that this sounds kind of condescending, arrogant? It's like, you are on the top floor, you're above the others, and then you give your tips to the peons below. And that's an interesting way to see it. And I kind of understand how this could be perceived this way, but okay, you've probably listened to this show long enough that I hope you have the idea that that's actually not the case. No, it's a very simple thing behind this name. When I started to podcast back in April 2005, yep, it's that long ago, I did it originally back in Tübingen in my flat. I lived in a small flat on the top floor under the roof of a 5-story building in Tübingen, Germany. That's where the name came from. I was looking for a name to make this kind of easy to remember, but not too obviously about photography, because I could envision like every second show calling itself photo this, photo that. And that's where Tips from the Top Floor came about. Also like TF, those two different letters and different combinations. Anyway, long story. I changed it officially to Photography Tips from the Top Floor. I did add photography into the title because after a few years, there were so many shows then about photography that it was kind of hard to be found. And people do search for photography, obviously, so that's why I kind of made it PTFTTF, but it is still TFTTF. And then I did rent a studio space at the end of 2005, and that was on the second floor, which is the top floor of that building. And then later moved in with Monica, and that's when my office and my studio ended up being on the top floor again. And now the only kind of exception is now in the Viewfinder Villa, which is our home and the place where we hold workshops and seminars and things. My studio, the place I'm sitting in right here, is on the ground floor. But there's a studio room upstairs on the top floor as well. So I could pretend to be up there. Anyway, long story short, this is not a long episode because I'm in the middle of preparations for my tour. When you're listening to this, I'm already gone. I'm probably close to coming back. And here's a question from Marsalia.
Hi Chris, this is Marsalia from South Africa. I've been listening to your show now for a while. I have two computers with Lightroom on both. I've been syncing the catalog between the two computers, but I found that I lose the settings of Lightroom. How do I keep both catalogs on the computers up to date? How would you suggest I do it? Thank you.
Thanks for your question. Okay, syncing Lightroom and the settings and the catalog, it's kind of, well, it's not built for that. That's one of the bigger problems, especially when you work on multiple computers. Many people have the setup of Lightroom being on a desktop computer plus on a laptop. I do that for travel. I know a lot of people that have this kind of a setup, and there is not a good way to synchronize the two computers in both directions. There's no two-way sync, which is a pity. So first of all, it works best if you designate one computer to be the kind of the master, the one that has the truth, and the other computer should then copy from that one. When it comes to your settings, as in like your presets and things, Those live in your Lightroom directory. And I'm just opening this here on a Mac. It's under your home directory, and then under library, application support, Adobe, Lightroom, and then there's the color profiles and develop presets and device. The icons, I don't even know what it uses those for. Export presets. There's all sorts of presets, and those directories you can copy over. That would be one way to kind of do that, to copy the settings directories over. That's probably the best way, to be honest. That's the way that I would prefer. Now, I don't do this. I have my on-the-road presets and things, and those are different from the ones that I have here on my main master system. And then, yeah, you might be able, if you know what a symlink is, a symbolic link, which is something you can do on the, like in the terminal, look that up. You could link those directories into Dropbox and then, or move them to Dropbox and then link them back to the library directory. It's a bit of a complicated thing, not really the right place here to explain that in detail, but symbolic links are another way to kind of do that. Now, let's talk about syncing of the actual catalog, because I know that there are people out there who use Dropbox to sync the catalog. The catalog has to be local to your system. It can't be just on a network drive somewhere. It has to be local. And Dropbox makes copies of files that are local. So that works. And you could, in theory, just in theory, don't go and do it now, because I have plenty of reasons you shouldn't do it. You could sync the catalog and the previews and the smart previews. Those are all inside there, little files there. Well, little or sometimes a bit bigger. And while that works, sort of, you've got to be really, really careful, because there's such an easy chance of stuff getting mixed up. I mean, here's an example. Let me try to explain that. And I have experimented with that, and I had issues, and I'm a computer guy. I know my way around computers, so there's and I kind of know what I'm doing, and I had issues there. So let's try an example. You have the usual desktop and laptop setup like a lot of people do, and you travel and you import and edit the photos on the laptop while you travel, and then you come home. And well, first thing is you have to wait for the sync to finish before you even think of opening the catalog on your desktop. Because if it's not finished, you will run into a conflict. And what happens if you have the catalog open on one system and you try to open it on another system? Now, there is a real chance for this to go wrong. And then there's a sync conflict, and I'm not really sure how Dropbox resolves those. That's probably going to dump one of the files or throw it away. In short, there's a good chance you lose edits and photos this way. So don't do it. That's the two-way sync using these kind of things is not recommended. I will not put my catalog on a Dropbox drive and sync things back and forth this way, because it has a massive chance of messing things up. And if you do, make backups, and you better know what you're doing. The best thing that works best is to do is to use a one-way street kind of approach, where your master system is your master system, and you will import pictures onto your laptop, you will edit them there, and then you export those from your laptop and then import them back into your desktop system. This is the safest way to make this work. I wish there was a better way. I wish there was an easier way to do this, but there isn't. There really isn't. Those sync things, those homebrew sync things, I've seen those go wrong too many times, so I do not recommend to do them. And by the way, the latest version, just recently updated version of Discover Lightroom, the video workshop that I recorded back in 2014, there's now a new version that goes with Lightroom CC, with the Creative Cloud version. It includes all the things that are new. It includes a lot of interesting stuff, and it's about 5 hours of DRM-free video. It has demo catalogs with it, so the things I do in there, some of them you can actually play along on your own system. And there's one area that explicitly covers how to sync and how to set this up. And then there is also a section that is 11 edits. 11 edits is where you look over my shoulder and I will show you how I edit some of my favorite photos from the last couple of years. And then you get a demo catalog where you can edit those too. So you get access to the files that are pre-edit, and then you can try out my edits, follow along, and just learn this way. It's a wonderful way to learn. And you can find this over at discoverlightroom.com. That's discoverlightroom.com. Go check it out. There's also a lot of free videos there. If you want a little preview, that's where you can get it. discoverlightroom.com.
Hi, Chris. Love listening to your show. Look forward to your thoughts and your analytical and creative way of thinking every week. And a while back, you had a physicist on your show. He was mentioning how a color was not a real color. It was made up. And it got me thinking about a nerdy topic. But it is understanding light. The color of light is a wavelength. This is a linear variation. How does this reconcile with a color wheel that turns back on itself? I don't see how this is going to change the way I do things, but it has been bothering me for a while. I want to grok light. Thank you very much for your efforts. I share your podcast with anybody who has an interest in photography, and I've given you very high ratings on several sites. Thanks again, Robert O'Neill, San Diego, California.
Thank you, Robert. Thanks so much also for giving ratings to the show. That's an excellent way to support Tips from the Top Floor. Just go to iTunes and then click on the more stars, the better, of course. Okay, your question, what is magenta? That is a very good question because magenta is not a color. Well, at least not in the sense of the rainbow. If you look at the spectrum of light, there's several ways to kind of put the spectrum of light on, on a chart of sorts. And one is a linear version. You just go by wavelength and you start somewhere in the lower energy warmth, right? You have heat, radiation, and then it goes and becomes infrared radiation, and then it starts going higher energy, and then it starts going into that area that we call the visible spectrum, and that is where it starts with red, and the red is then visible, and it goes through to yellow and green and blue into violet, and then you get ultraviolet, which again is not visible to our to our eyes. We do not see the ultraviolet. So infrared, ultraviolet are just outside the visible spectrum, and we cannot see them. Now, that is fine and good. And by the way, those are then black, of course. We cannot see them, so they do not reflect or they do not radiate visible light, so they're black for all intents and purposes. Now, if you go and put this all into what's called a color circle, you have this, just take this linear thing and wrap it around in a circle. You stick those ends together and you end up with, well, a circular thing, but then there is this black gap between red and blue because there is nothing. So interestingly enough, what they've done with I'm not really sure who exactly did it, but someone at some point said, wait, let's combine the red and the blue. Let's add those wavelengths together. Let's have these two separate wavelengths, and our eye perceives that as magenta. That is pretty much the simplified version of the story. And interestingly enough, if you look along that continuum of visible light of wavelengths, all of the ones that I talked about earlier, the red, the yellow, the green, the blue, the cyan, the blue, and the violet, all of those can be represented by a single wavelength or by a very narrow band of wavelengths, and we will see that color with our eyes. Magenta is the only one that doesn't have the single wavelengths, that is multiple wavelengths, that we then kind of interpret as magenta. Now, you can, of course, go at that from a different angle, and that is complementary colors. If you look at complementary colors, that's one of the reasons there is this color circle, that you have the orange kind of opposite of the blue, you have the red opposite of the green, and then, or of the, well, actually, red is more opposite of the like cyan, and then green has an opposite of magenta. So that's how they work together. That's kind of the complementary color. And from that theory, that image circle, that color circle makes perfect sense. But from a continuum point of view, it doesn't. So that's why it is kind of weird, but hey, it does work. All right, that was it for this episode of Tips from the Top Floor. Thank you so much for being around, for subscribing, for participating in the Slack challenge, for supporting the show at tfttf.com/support. Thanks all. Thank you. I am on my way home. I hope to be able to bring you a show next week. Working on it probably as we speak. I hope to get you a little virtually live thing straight from that wonderful place over in the Himalayas in Bhutan. I'll definitely bring home some material, so that includes photos but also some audio. I want to record a few things, maybe some video. Still have to see what I can do, what makes sense, but hey, I'm working on it. Music for the show by Jeff Smith, silent partner Hans-Peter Kagrud, publishing and Slack challenges by Release Pixie, Matt Rafseder Armstead. Check out the current Slack challenge, the bokeh challenge, and Slack invitations are handled by Chief Invitation Officer CIO Russ. My name is Chris Marquardt. Follow me on Facebook and on Twitter at Chris Marquardt, Chris MarQuardt.
And I told you that you laughed.
And of course, go out and take amazing photos. I'm mixing German and English. Go out and take amazing photos. Be nice to each other and happy shooting.